exactly towards where the apples were.
Looks like they're moving towards the apple. So I'm trying to get you to believe that these things are moving to apples.
I'm seeing in this one, I'm seeing the heel, and I'm seeing see the toe marks in there. So I'm seeing a bit of toe marks and a definitive heel mark.
This is not objective analysis. This is a prosecutor prosecuting the case. And that's
by the way, and I do it on the show. Did you hear a fart?
I did not.
There was a fart. I just picked that up. I'm going back. It might be Sasquatch too.
Oh yeah, it probably was.
Let me just keep your ears open. I heard that and I thought, Jesus.
I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
There it is.
A definitive heel mark.
Are you sure that wasn't a Bigfoot growl? Because it could have been a Bigfoot growl
in there. So I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
That is a fart. I'm sorry. That is definitely a fart. One more time.
I see the toe mark. I'm seeing a bit of toe marks.
Yeah.
And a definitive heel mark.
So Todd Standing not too good with post-production. I did hear that right, didn't I?
Oh, I hear it, right.
I'm seeing
last one, I promise.
I'm seeing see the toe marks in there? So I'm seeing a bit of toe marks. And a definitive
Good catch. Good catch.
Oh, that's brilliant. So we know we've solved the mystery of what happens when three old guys go into the woods with their partner. There's no way the apex predator Sasquatch is going to be able to. They're not going to be able to sneak up on him. I don't think. So today we are going to be reviewing the film Discovering Bigfoot, and we've had a good reply from the audience when it comes to conspiracy theories. And just to give you an overview, the documentary is by a gentleman by the name of Todd Standing, who he's quite an advocate in the Bigfoot community from what I can understand. And I think Andrew has done some research. I've done some research. He's a bit of a controversial character in some of those circles. So just to give an overview of the film, Todd Standing, who claims, which we'll probably come back to this, I'm just going to give a quick overview, Andrew, and maybe we go through some of the notable scenes from start to finish. But the film is based on Todd Standing, who initially represents himself as a skeptic, and he brings in two biologists, one of which who I think is fairly legit. The other one I think is a bit questionable. Given some of the things he says throughout the documentary, but that's my view. We'll get your view in a second on that, Andrew. And the film breaks down into a few different sections. And the first section is him representing what is an example of an encounter with Sasquatch. And my view going into the film is I don't believe there is Bigfoot. So his encounter with Bigfoot. The second section is him taking biologists into the field to give them an encounter and experience. And these both biologists do have an interest in Bigfoot, but one of them specifically isn't necessarily committing to being a believer. He's very scientific in some of his approaches. And then the film continues along the same vein where he's continuing to show evidence that he has found to biologists and getting their opinion. He then goes back to Jeff Meldrum, who's one of the main biologists, to get his take on some video that he's seen. And then he wraps up the film, again, back in the field, showing more of his, quote, evidence. Would you say that's an accurate summary of the film?
I think that's very accurate.
And what I find interesting with that is there wasn't a lot to the film, was my view. I think my first takeaway was the film was just a bunch of Todd Standing pointing at things saying, hey, look at that. That's Bigfoot. And that was my first takeaway.
Yeah, I was very surprised. Based on, you told me to take a look at this thing. And my father was very much into conspiracy theories and cryptozoology and aliens from a skeptic's point of view, but he enjoyed looking at those kinds of things. And as a result, as a kid, I've seen a lot of those kinds of things, and just through the osmosis of living in that household. And I have a rhythm in my mind of how they're supposed to go. And what was odd, I think, and guess what you're getting at, is that the star of this movie about Bigfoot was not Bigfoot, but Todd Standing.
He was. He was. I think I saw more Todd Standing than I did the biologists, and I was more interested in what they had to say.
Right, right. And Todd Standing, I mean, ultimately, he's a Bigfoot hunter, quote unquote. But in some senses, he should be playing the moderator, if that's the term I can use, of a full story about how we're setting about proving that this thing exists. Instead of that, it's really largely, I mean, he frankly bullies, some his professor people, which we'll talk about later. But he feels more like, I mean, he's obviously auditioning himself, in my mind, for a Discovery Channel show in the extreme wilderness doing extreme things, right? He has this forceful personality that he's constantly trying to communicate on camera, really at the expense of his own material.
And I think that's a really good point. That was one of the main takeaways I pulled away. One point that you brought up that I read, that he actually, following the making of the documentary, he had another he was involved in another show, I think it was on Discovery, with a gentleman by the name of Les Stroud. Now, Les Stroud, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's done Survivor Man on Discovery Channel. So he would go out, and they would have, like, let's say, plane wreckage they'd find in the middle of the desert, and they drop him down as if he had just crashed there and he had to survive with the camera. So similar to what Bear Grylls is over here. And I like Les Stroud. And he did a show where Les Stroud's been in the woods and he's seen some funny things. I didn't watch it, but apparently Todd Standing has done some stuff with Les Stroud. And people in the Bigfoot community weren't happy because it gave him a bit of legitimacy. But your point that his documentary was at the expense of I guess the outcome of what he was trying to prove was very much central on my viewpoint. Because instead of, let's say, mapping out a case for Bigfoot, saying
right,
Exhibit A, and here's the evidence, and here's why I believe that's the case, and here's the method that we're going to be going to maybe try to build on this piece of evidence. He pretty much just walks around the whole film pointing at shit, which may be a good point. I think what we'll do is we're going to jump into some of the clips. And what I want to do is jump into the first scene, because when I started watching it with my wife, the first thing we noticed was really the quality of it reminded me of, I think I mentioned this to you on message. It reminded me of like an 8th grade VHS tape that the religion teacher would chuck on to learn about, let's say, the Holy Communion. So I'm going to put on the screen here. Let me just pull up. And this is where I am sometimes terrible, Andrew. You're going to find that my production quality, that's why I got those intros and outros, to try to legitimize the whole thing. So I need
Sean,
to go.
Don't worry about it. I think about this all the time, that I have a, the classic face for radio, but I have the voice for silent movies. So where does that leave me?
That seem to have more downloads than any other, which is why I wanted to check it out. So what we were introduced to in the first scene is Todd Standing going back to the scene of some work he had done, I guess, 5 or 6 months beforehand. And the first thing he's talking about is he's in this alcove, and the first scene for me is I lose quite a bit of buy-in to Todd Standing right out of the gate. And there's a few questions I have, and I think you had a few questions in this first reenactment of his standard Bigfoot sightings. And the first one is this for me.
Now this is where it all started. I was sleeping here, and they were up what is about 10 yards above me.
So I've done some, not survival training, I'm not an outdoors person, but I've done a lot of, I've taken kids camping, I've done some basic survival stuff. And when he was out there, he said there was 2 feet of, maybe 3 feet of snow on the ground. And he said it was minus 20 degrees. So he's from Canada. I believe maybe that's minus 20 Celsius. He's sleeping in 2 feet of snow in the middle of brush. So if you're sleeping in minus 20 and 2 feet of snow, what you're going to do is you're going to dig sort of like, I forget what they call them, like a bivvy or an igloo or something. You're going to dig down into the snow, and you're going to try to shield yourself from the temperatures. He's in the middle of brush. So he's trying to uh, give the impression that he was just sleeping in the sticks. And right away, I'm questioning as to whether he's already telling the truth. So I already have some buy-in issues at this stage.
Can I say
please.
something here? Because what we learned, I've already learned something in this documentary. You can criticize it all you want, but I've already learned that the plural of Sasquatch is in fact Sasquatch.
That is something I didn't know. So
Yeah,
it's
well,
not.
see, there
Did
you
he say
go. You don't
Sasquatch
add an S.
as
It's
a
like the
plural?
plural of deer is deer, right? He says one of said Sasquatch, or one of the Sasquatch went this way, right? So plural. Anyway,
So it's
go
not
ahead.
Sasquatch, or it's definitely not Sasquatches.
Sasquatches.
That doesn't sound.
No, that would be
Sasqueeze was a moose.
Sasquatches.
You would think
Yeah, you
Sasquatch.
think. Yeah, that's where I would have gone with it, but okay.
So he's claiming this here in a second is a Sasquatch standing there.
Yes.
So his
Yes.
storyline, correct me if I'm wrong on this. He is standing, he's now standing here. He's 15 yards, which is nothing from what's an 8+ foot tall Sasquatch. And it's standing right there, and the other two are up on the hill, and it's frozen, and it doesn't think he can, he can see this Sasquatch. I think it's a tree.
I think so too. I think it's part of that tree.
And to back it up, he then tries to show, and I'll play, that he's trying to represent it. So he's put the camera down. The camera is now probably 6 feet below his feet, and he's put it down in the snow, it looks like.
I'm standing there in the trackway, and when I jump or put my arms in the air, my hands straight up in the air are about 8'6", which are still not reaching the height of the Sasquatch that had just been previously standing there.
So he's using that camera angle to represent that this back here, let me find it, is the same as this right here.
Yeah, the camera angle clearly changed.
So I'm just, for me, it's right away. This is what he's representing as his evidence. As his, this is so good that I need to share this with everybody. This is the thing I'm like, if you look at comedians or musicians, they always lead with their best and finish with their best, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do. In fact, you know what? I have a note on this, and if you wouldn't mind switching, my laptop, I believe, is on air. I'm going to play
I will.
A very short clip from a mini series that I believe produced in England, but regardless, or by English producers, called "The Men Who Killed Kennedy." It's from the mid '80s. All right, now I'm going to mute my mic for a moment. This is from a documentary called "The Men Who Killed Kennedy," and just to introduce it for a minute for context, I remember seeing this when I was a little kid. My parents watched it. I think it aired on PBS here in the States. And so I have vague memories of it. And so one time when I was an adult, I was like, what was that documentary? I remember being really mysterious and fascinating. I try to find it on the internet, now 30 years later or whatever it was. And sure enough, I found it. And I got to, this is fairly early. This is about an hour into the whole thing on YouTube edited together. It's a 7-hour set of things. This is about an hour in, and I remember having the biggest laugh out loud moment. These two fellows are studying a photograph of the so-called grassy knoll. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Kennedy assassination, basically his limo is driving down the road. The idea is that Lee Harvey Oswald is in that book depository above, if you believe the official account, and he's shooting down from the building at Kennedy. But people who are into conspiracy theories have long argued that there was somebody standing in the quote-unquote grassy knoll, which is off to the side, but at least on a physical level, closer to where the limo was when Kennedy was shot. So although it's moving across, the limo would have been moving across the field of vision of somebody. In fact, it's where the photographs were taken. The famous film, the Zapruder film, was taken from the grassy knoll. So the idea is that somebody was not far from where Abraham Zapruder was taking that movie, but maybe slightly up the hill in the bushes. And they have a photograph of that area, and this is what happens. So I'm going to mute the mic.
Oh, hey, Andrew. Have you? Oh, never mind.
What?
I was wondering if you shared the audio. Did you tick the share audio button?
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
So now go back to let me move the screen off the off of here for a second. So when you go back into it, unshare your screen. You might need to reshare it, but there's a tick box at the bottom when you share it that says share audio as well.
Share.
So you're sharing screen, but there's a separate thing down below that before you share your screen that says share audio.
StreamYard. No, I don't see that. It just says allow share Firefox with only sites you trust. Well, you know what? You don't even need the. I mean, the audio makes it slightly funnier, but
well, let's pop it on then. Go ahead and share it. And if we don't hear, that's not a problem.
Yeah. I will allow, and I'll back. You get the idea that they are. I guess I can narrate it.
Yeah, if you have it muted, you can narrate it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You get the idea that they're, trying to show kind of what Todd Standing was trying to show, that there must be somebody in this photograph. It's this image of this area, and so they get him to stand there and take a measurement, and yada yada yada. They're going to go back to the photograph in a minute of that's the same spot, and here we go.
So they're claiming that smudge
there's somebody
is a person.
there. Wait, oh yeah, watch this. And I'm going to tell you, later in the documentary, it's even funnier is they go back to that photograph and they do that same thing again, only they show like 7 people in the photograph. They're like, it's a whole forest of people.
I love it. That reminds me of like every ghost hunting show where they like claim to see like like something in a silhouette and I can't see it. And then the TV show is very nice, kindly silhouettes it for you so they can show you what they're suggesting.
Yeah. I like also he's wearing like a Sherlock Holmes hat, I think, in this one. Anyway. It's really like it's unintentional comedy at its best, but that's exactly what I was watching. That's what I'm looking at. I'm like, oh, like this is actually frankly clearer. Like if you wanted to use your imagination, but what I noticed,
I can see what he's saying. Yeah, he's saying this here, right here on the like. You're not seeing my pointer. The bit to the left of the tree. I think he's looked at this photo and said, "Oh, that looks like I can, portray that as a shoulder." Because I'm not buying that this is anything. And whether he believes,
and I will say this though, like keep in mind, I think we've already, said, and I'll probably talk about later, but we've already said this guy's not above essentially faking what he needs to fake. So there even could be something there. You know what I mean? Like he and a partner could have established this shot.
But he then says that, I've taken scientists into the field with me before, and 80% of the time, I think he said, we have real life encounters with Sasquatch. However, I get my best results on my own. So the next scene is him showing another documented encounter with a Sasquatch. And this was an intriguing encounter to me because I'm going to play just not a scene, but I'm going to show an image here, which for me, again, I'm starting to question, where are we at here? So he's got clearly has a night vision camera. He's showing a night vision camera, and he's walking around whilst he's being surrounded by Sasquatch. Now, this is the only time we see the night vision camera employed, not when he's looking at him apparently 10 yards away. He also has set up apples. Now, one of his favorite ploys is to set up apples to try to pull them in. Now, he's got the money for a night vision camera, but he has yet to employ a $20 trail cam that takes pictures based on movement. So he's never at any point in this situation decided, you know what? If I put a trail cam by the apples that they always grab, I'm going to make millions because I've discovered Sasquatch. And I think it was, where was it? We actually see, and to me, this looks like a joke a bit. But on his night vision camera, which is placed what looks to be a good 20 yards away from the apples. So he's made sure that the night vision camera, the one camera that would get the most detail of anything in the middle of the woods, is as far away as possible. And in this scene, you can see the apple, actually something taking the apple. So it happens at about 25:58, so about 8 seconds. If you look in this area, you see that hand there?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's for what I don't understand is, again, for an apex predator like the Sasquatch, why do they have to be so sneaky to take his apples? Is it a bit of a moral thing where they feel kind of bad about taking things? They don't have jobs, no money, so it looks like they actually have somebody with a black glove.
Yeah,
it just looks so fake. It's so funny. One more time. It just makes me laugh just to see how it picks it up too, because it's just almost like I don't want to get caught. I'm just gonna pull it away casually. Where are we at? 25:40. So in about 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. So there's the 3 apples.
Right.
And he's looking at
there it goes.
What I think a lot of Bigfoot sightings turn out to be. And there's video of, let me see if I can find a video of this. I've seen this, and to me, this is what, because bears, black bears, grizzly bears, they're quite agile, and they're used to getting things high up in trees. Sure. And I saw this bear walking bipedal. I saw a video of a bear walking bipedal. Let me share this here. So this is what a
Oh wow, that bear walking around. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that if I saw that from a distance, I would be, wow. Okay, that's really good.
But to me, you could, if you've never seen, and I didn't know that bears did this, so I wouldn't assume Bigfoot, but you can understand, especially in areas where you see Bigfoot statues, and I think some of so to a certain degree, Jeff Meldrum, there's a point. Actually, I'm not going to step on my toes here. But you get to the point where even if you don't believe it, you get so saturated with these thoughts and everybody's seeing this and everyone's experiencing this. And then when you see, whatever this is walking around, if you're just turning your head really quick, you're like, that's a baby Bigfoot. Or it looks more like a person in a suit than it does like that. I could see why somebody would say that's a Bigfoot.
But having traveled in this country for 5 days now and seen no other such structures except in the area where he's observed Sasquatches, I'm now willing to conclude that these are associated with the presence of Sasquatches, which has been...
All right, pause right there. He's willing to... What they're out there to prove is that Sasquatches exist, right? So what you need to do, if you're doing the correct scientific method, is interpret independently evidence until you can lead to that conclusion. What he's doing is saying, okay, I see these structures. I thought they looked like natural structures. But since they only seem to be around where Todd Standing says he sees Bigfoot, which has not yet been proven, that therefore they are proof of Bigfoot. It's circular reasoning. And that is begging the question. It's assuming the answer to arrive at the conclusion that you wanted to arrive at in the first place. Bigfoot must exist because these structures are only where Todd Standing says he sees Bigfoot, and therefore they must have been created by Bigfoot. But that's a tightly packed circle.
And there was one other thing I wanted to go back to with regard to, because at one point he thanks the Wildlife Service and rescue or something, and he mentioned something about a grizzly encounter. So he mentioned he had a grizzly encounter at one point, and I think what he's representing is Bigfoot footage, because he sounds scared as shit in this encounter.
For the next 3 days, as I returned to base camp, this group of Sasquatch harassed me relentlessly.
After sleeping less than 30 minutes, I was awakened by rocks that were thrown at me and growling sounds from multiple directions. Fuck. After 2 nights of this, I'd had enough, so you'll see me here crack open one of my
did you hear him
big
say
flares.
fuck?
Damn it.
Did you hear
You
like
know?
the way he reacted to me? That was the most authentic line in this whole film.
After 2 nights of this, I'd had enough, so you'll see me here crack open one of my big flares. These growling sounds you hear are from 6 to 10 yards away, again in multiple directions.
So here's why I think that's a real encounter with a real animal. If you go to the other scenes where he is being encountered by Sasquatch, he's like, "Hey, big boy. Hey, it's Todd. I've got some apples for you." And that was like making the noises I would make if I saw a bear. "Rah! Rah!" Lighting flares. Fuck, fuck. He's run into
Yeah.
some grizzly bears. He referenced it at one point in the film, an encounter with grizzlies. He's seen this and he's like, you know what? This is going to be my Sasquatch moment here. I'm going to be sharing this as Sasquatch evidence.
Yeah, listen, I was not a believer when this video started, and I mean, what I found interesting was, and I think you kind of referenced this to make it full circle, is that if you were trying to make I've certainly seen more effective presentations of people proving that there are big feet than this. You know what I mean? Like, he seems to have the goods with the photographs, and people, you can look up yourself. There's a website, right, that I showed you where,
I can share that with you, actually.
but what you find out is that even in the Bigfoot community, he's considered something of a joke, and more than a joke, an annoyance, because the real quote unquote big feet people are like, these hoaxers are just ruining our actual pursuit of these things that really exist. Here's a photograph of Todd Standing. Here's a photograph of one of the photographs he supposedly took of Bigfoot, and you can see, I don't know if GIF will. Oh, there it goes. Right, that it's clearly they can show you how he mapped the Bigfoot face using Photoshop, and reasonably good job of it in terms of technical prowess, but it's really just his face.
It could be too. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. This could be, because this is also what we have to take into account. That part of the article here is Bigfoot is 100% real breathing creature, but
right.
So
these people make the fair point that Todd Standing, after his documentary came out, first of all, the Todd Standings and his wife own a production company, which should be a red flag for anybody, and that he filed frivolous but attempt at attention-getting lawsuits in Canada, and now he's got one in the U.S. The lawsuits are meant to basically force the government to acknowledge the existence of Bigfoot and then take conservationist efforts to preserve it. But again, it's like a Miracle on 34th Street trying to prove there's a Santa Claus in court. That's a movie.
Canada threw out that.
It certainly did, right? Exactly. And the burden of proof obviously rests with him, as I said to you. And he just falls well short of the mark, as everyone does. But even in presentation, he had stuff that he could have presented better, but again, he made himself rather than material the star of the show. This could have been a more effective attempt at proving the existence of these things than it really was.
And I think the issue is going to come down to his inability to do so. his knowledge. I mean, even his knowledge. I question some of the even just him being out in the woods in survival situations in high tops. I found that weird as somebody who does a lot of hiking and a lot of outdoor stuff. It's not unusual. So people that do the cross country walks here will usually wear running shoes because they're really comfortable when you're walking 20 miles a day, 10 miles a day. But for somebody who's in the back country like that, there was a scene where he was measuring out Bigfoot steps. He was in a pair of what looked like basketball shoes. And I found that weird for somebody who's supposed to be an outdoorsman, a trained, tracker, to wear high tops. But that's not, I mean, it's possible. It's possible that he just prefers to wear high tops. They are comfortable. So I'm not going to begrudge him on that.
Well, again, this gets back to the goal of the film, right? Is the goal of the film to make any kind of attempt to really show? Is that what he is concerned about? Is making any case for Bigfoot, or is it to make himself a star? And I think that's really the issue. He's trying to make himself a star. It's an extended audition. You know, if somebody liked this thing and offered him a contract to go cryptozoology and chasing, you know, any other animals of mythical, you know, like go find a griffin, let's go find whatever, aliens, let's go find, he would, that's what this is about, is not about making any legitimate effort to prove that there is a Bigfoot.
So in the end, I think collectively we give it 2 thumbs down. It's shit. It's not worth watching. I would say on a scale, Hugh and I will do a scale on 1 to 10. If I were to put this on a scale of 1 to 10, my wife would give it a 0. And she was really annoyed that I paid to rent it again so I could share it with everybody today.
You know, I didn't have to pay over here in the States. It's included in Amazon Prime.
Yeah, well, I ended up having to pay to get it again. But if I were to give it a score, I would give... Just to give, I think Dr. Meldrum was the most legit thing in that. So I'll give some points for bringing him into the process. So I'm going to give it a 3. No, 2. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10.
Well, I mean, let me see. As a piece of presentation, like I said, I have seen more effective versions of this documentary. Dr. Meldrum is fine. Kind of like I think you and I said at the beginning, even more so than The Office. The Office scene almost seems sort of anticlimactic with the video.
Yeah.
When he's first out there in the woods, they're definitely, and he's being asked all those leading aggressive questions by Todd Standing. Don't you think this is Bigfoot? Don't you think this is Bigfoot? He really looks like a guy who realizes he's with someone who's truly unstable and is just trying to keep him calm so he can get out of the situation. So he's and so I give him credit for surviving the experience, because I do think that Todd Standing, you know, if he had his fixed delusion challenged, he might, although I don't know if he really legitimately holds it or not. But bottom line is, I would say that as a documentary, 0. I agree with your wife.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Now, if I were rating it in say like its unintentional comedic value, it's better in the first half than the second half. Once he leaves the trail, it kind of, you know, I was
It's
having
the
a
same
good laugh
film
for the first hour.
Yeah, it's very redundant. It's the same thing.
Yeah, so I would give it, you know, on that scale, you know, it's worth a watch for the first hour. You know, if you have a couple beers with your buddies and you want to have a good laugh.
Exactly.
But turn it off after about an hour.